Good morning. I'm Kristen McIntyre, and I'm happy to serve as today's service coordinator. If you are new to North Chapel, welcome. And if you are visiting, please consider signing the guest book at the back of the sanctuary. Before we start today's service, I'm wondering if we have any announcements. Yes.
Good morning. Richard and I missed the deadline with all of the holiday hoorah and Peg's not being well, but listening to our lives is going to happen again on Wednesday. It's the second Wednesday, even though it doesn't feel like the second Wednesday of January. So 3:30 on Wednesday in the parlors. Hope to see some of you then.
I've now shrunk a foot, but I think it's better. Got rid of the step stool. Okay. Any other announcements? We have a new friend in the back. Hi, Max. And there will be coffee hour downstairs after the service. This morning's opening words are from Reverend Leah Ungiri. Weavers of one story. Here we are together, each facing our different human tasks, or maybe the same central one, to embrace the lessons life delivers, to discern and respond as we grow, to refuse harm and cherish flourishing. May we know ourselves as vessels of infinite possibility, holders of each other's heartaches and tales of joy alike, weavers of one story, in which we each have our own part.
When I was still teaching, I played a joke on some of my kids, some of my students. We were dealing with issues of race and difference, and I was challenging them. And we had just read a very complicated book by Toni Morrison, and one of my students said, you know, according to our conversations, it makes me wonder, did you have to be a Black woman to write the book Beloved? You know, and I was like, oh my God, they're really climbing into the material, and it was a beautiful question. I didn't know how to answer it in a way that opened up to possibilities moving forward. But one of my students interrupted, Darren Dodson, I still remember his name, and he said, I think that only Toni Morrison could have written Beloved. You know, so I smiled as if that was my secret answer all along. Even though it really was not. I was really saved by it. But I got out of it by saying, I said, they were really wonderful kids. I can't even tell you how wonderful they were. But they weren't totally catching it. So I said, I gave them a trick question. I said, do you think that an African-American man, so the questions were designed to like expose our secret assumptions, right? Okay, so I said, do you think an African-American man could have written, or do you think a black man could have written a book like, I don't know, let's say, The Three Musketeers? Okay, and there was a kid in my class named Jimmy Carter, which is why I laughed when you lit the candle, Linda. And Jimmy raised his hand, African-American kid, and he was like, hey, Leon, I got it. And I said, put your hand down, Jimmy. And he was like, no, man, I really need to tell you. And he was like, I said, put your hand down. And he said, Leon, I have something to say. And I said, put it down. And then he looked at me like, fine, you're about to make a fool of yourself, and I'm gonna sit here and watch. Right? Because Three Musketeers is written by Alexander Dumas, a black man in the Caribbean. And so the first student raised their hand and said, I think that a black man could have written the book if they had like the original. They could have written like the sequel. Right, and then someone else said, I think with, if they had the right schooling, so there was a bunch of like really flawed responses, And then as Jimmy saw that what I was doing was canvassing those flawed responses, trying to like call out of us the things that we think that are kind of wrong, he kind of smiled, And then I looked at him with softer eyes and he understood why I was telling him to not save me from my obvious mistake. And then at the end of the class, I said, Jimmy, would you tell them? And he said it was written by Alexander Dumas. And oh my God, I still remember, I don't want to call her up by name because it's on YouTube, but one of my students whose name I still remember, and she'll know if she ever sees this and she'll thank me for not mentioning her name, was like, she just was crushed. She's this perfect straight A student, with a heart of gold. And she was just crushed and she was like, crestfallen. And I was like, it's not you. It's just the shape of our world. And we need to be gentle as we grow through the edges of it. So, thank you, Jimmy Carter, my Jimmy Carter, and thank you, Jimmy Carter. Trust in the tensile strands of love, even if the earth is shaking beneath your feet. A poet writes, trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch and hold you in the web of life that is often torn but is always healing. There is your strength, the shifting plates, the restive earth, your room, your precious life, they all proceed from love, the ground on which we walk together. And there's a beautiful song. It goes, the words are, there is a love holding me. And the second time it's us. There is a love holding all that I love. And the second time it's all that we love. And then there's the third line is, there is a love holding all, and we rest in this love. Okay, so there is a love holding me. Can you sing that? There is a love holding. Second line is, there is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. Okay, let's sing it two times through, once with I and then with we. Ready? There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. Let's sing the we part one more time, directing our love to Richard and Peg, for whom this song was thought of when we first started creating the healing circles years ago. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. Greet the new year well rested, and know deep the meaning of Sabbath in your heart. Gather up the spirit and try to imagine what it would mean to grow more beautifully. Life wants this from us and wants this for us. Life longs to ask us powerful questions. Questions like, how can we grow more beautifully into peace? How can we grow into the good gift of grace? How do we grow into courage, a courage that is tough enough to sustain us all? And how do we grow into love, a love that is soft enough that we might rest? Rest is so important for our health. Good morning and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. I hope that this new year finds you well as we enter 2025. Today is Sunday, January 5th, and the title of this morning's reflection is Sabbath. It is a reflection on the importance of gentleness and rest, and it connects with the seventh principle of Unitarian Universalism, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Of course, Sabbath is not a time simply of rest, but a time of spiritual rest. It is a time of spiritual recovery, and spiritual recovery can lead to unimagined possibilities. So let's greet this new year well rested, and let's make one resolution, not many, one. Let's be not driven by anxiety when we do. Let's be drawn by grace. Let's follow grace's lead. This means something that's very real, this idea of being drawn by grace. Being drawn by grace means standing apart from the urgent promises to do better this year. Annually, we resolve to be better at things somehow. Being drawn by grace means setting aside the urgent resolutions to find inner peace, to lose weight, to work out until we're weightless, to drink less alcohol, to eat more vegetables, to deepen our practice of compassion. Being drawn by grace does not mean that we throw away these urgent resolutions. There's nothing wrong with them, they're fine. They're quite beautiful, in fact. We just need to get rid of the urgency. Let's resolve not to rush about our lives. It's hard to grow wise and strong by being urgent. Let's turn to the wisdom of the hollow road, to the wisdom of the shaky ground, and to the wisdom of gentleness and rest. Gentleness and rest are warm fire sisters. It's always good to have those two around. We've met them before and we'll meet them again. We learn from them all the time. Commonly, they come to us, entering our lives, teaching us year after year, day to day, moment by moment, and now. They greet us, sometimes with flowers. We meet toward the ends of honest journeys. They lessen our weariness. They reduce our suffering. Gentleness and rest lighten up the burdens that we carry, burdens that we've carried for too long a time now. For so many years, a poet writes. For so many years, I was dead on a hollow road, the dirty old blood running through my veins. I was making all kinds of weird decisions, and I shut all light from the sky. But I see a change as my knees are falling down to the praying ground. Holy might, grab hold of my soul for God. Holy might, grab hold of my soul. Holy might. I love these two words together. For me, they symbolize the sacred. For me, they say Holy One, or Great Spirit, or God Everlasting, or Prince of Peace, especially this close to the Christmas time. For me, they symbolize that force that has the power to get us through the night, that precious gift within us, that precious gift beyond us, that has the power to make things new. There are so many spiritual or religious names for this power that I'm talking about: the Spirit of life, the Spirit of truth, comforter, counselor, water, fire, love, wind, dove, faith, grace. The list goes on, and I'm comforted by the length of this list. I want it to go on forever. I'm comforted by our seeming inability to name the ineffable. That failure seems good and honest to me. The poet continues with a story. He says, "It's been a time I should have not lived through. I ought to be lying in the cold, cold ground instead of knocking along this highway, digging on God's holy word. But now I pray to the Lord in heaven, forgive this wicked fool." God, I love the blues. The blues can be brutal and holy and melodramatic all at once, without ever losing its cool, without ever loosening its tie, without ever removing its signature fedora hat. The blues prayer closes with these words, a New Year's resolution of its own. "I've got some work to get working on. I lost a lot of time in a coal mine hell, but it made my soul grow wise and strong, and now I live in a house made of stone. So let him in, all you weary pilgrims. Head to the praying ground." It's good advice, and we should do this, whatever the praying ground is for you, however you choose to name that place within and beyond you, that place of surrender and of acceptance, of justice, of love, and of peace. There are many names for this. The list goes on for a while, and here again it brings me comfort that it does. Whatever words we choose, however we name the praying ground, or even if we choose not to name it, let's allow ourselves to be present to gentleness and rest, the sacred sisters that commonly enter our lives. I'm pretty sure I met them the other day. I was meeting up with a friend at the Queechee Inn, and I was early. They weren't really even open for business yet. But they let me go in anyway and make myself comfortable, which was easy to do. It's lovely there. I just sat quietly by myself by the fire, and I took out my computer and started to do a little work in that beautiful northern New England setting. It was a very cold night, and I was glad of a chance to warm up a bit by the fire. I was glad to rest in such a setting. The peace and the quiet of a nearly empty restaurant was perfect. But the warmth and the peace and the quiet were all short-lived. Too soon, the back door opened wide, and I was reminded of the bitter cold outside. The back door opened and a family of 4 tumbled in, all dressed in ski wear from head to toe. They were stamping their boots, and they were shaking their hats, and they were rustling their coats to shake off the snow. There was a bit of a theme happening there, for the father and for the 2 little girls and for the mom, in that order. It was like a dance of a mini flash mob of love, and a little bit out of control. I was impressed. It was pretty fantastic. The casting and the costumes were great. The choreography was amazing, enough to impress Peg Brightman, which is really saying something. They were all in good spirits, which was nice, but they brought an end to the warmth and to the peace and the quiet that I had been anticipating. At least, I thought to myself, at least I still have a front row seat before the fire. Wherever the family would finally settle in this nearly empty restaurant, I knew that I was still sitting in the perfect spot. That thought made me feel generous for a moment. So I didn't mind the bitter cold, and I didn't let it bother me, and I didn't mind the stamping and the rustling and the utter loss of peace and quiet. And then the worst thing happened. Or the best thing, I don't know. The 2 little girls, the sacred sisters, they both sat down right in front of me, nearly entirely obscuring my formerly perfect seat in front of the fire. The picture's on the cover of your order of service. What's more is that the dad was giving them dinner, and they sat and they shared an order of chicken lo mein together. They ate it right out of the plastic to-go container with chopsticks and disposable forks, utensils that aided in the production of a series of loud burping and slurping sounds. It wasn't what I thought I was going to be experiencing in that moment, but it was wonderful. It wasn't what I was hoping for. It actually ruined what I was hoping for. But I didn't mind a bit because it was wonderful. I couldn't help but see the humor in this. I'm not always like that. I'm not always rested enough to be generous. When I'm tired, I can't always see the humor in things that don't go my way. When I'm tired, I get pretty grouchy. How is it with you? Can you be flexible when things don't go as planned? Can you make changes in the moment? Are you comfortable shifting your expectation to suit the needs of the occasion? If you cannot change and you cannot shift, what's preventing you from doing so? And if you can change and shift, what conditions would allow you to do so joyfully? It's a good question to ask ourselves. How do we open up to meet gentleness and grace? How closed are we? How quickly and how brusquely, what might we call them by other names? By less flattering names? How often do we send them on their way? We can do otherwise. The power that allows us to do otherwise, what is that? The power that allows us to do otherwise is the power of Sabbath. Gentleness and rest is the deep meaning of Sabbath. Through its gifts, we learn the wisdom of the hollow road. We learn the wisdom of the shaky ground. As biblical teaching reminds us, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. This is from Exodus. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to your God, and on it you shall not do any work. No one who observes this teaching works on the Sabbath day. No work is done on the Sabbath day. Each week we learn and relearn detachment from the business of life, detachment from the busyness of life, in order to come to terms with the meaning of the holy. Not simply the deep meaning of deep agreement. It's more than that. Faith is more diverse and more phenomenal than that. Do you remember in the early days of institutional diversity, this was like the 80s or the 90s, before they put a bullseye on its back? Diversity is made to wear a bullseye now. They're chasing after it. They're shooting it down. But it used to be a beautiful idea, and it still is outside of politics. And the civil rights movement opened us up, and genuine diversity became this wellspring, an uneventful revolution that happened in candy stores and in playgrounds. It was an incidental revolution that was powerful. We became normatively wise. We used to sing that British pop song with passion, a song called True Love and Apple Pie. Do you remember that one? I think you do. I'm sure you do. I'd like to build the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees and snow-white turtle doves. The third verse was, I'd like to see the world for once, all standing hand in hand, and hear the echo through the hills for peace throughout the land. Coca-Cola Company co-opted it in 1971. But it was still revolutionary. So broadly the message went out, imperfectly and commercialized, but the message went out that we are safe, that we are loved, and that peace is possible. So what if Coke was doing it? I don't care myself. I'm a pragmatist these days. I understand that it bothers some people that these essentially spiritual messages came linked to a soft drink, to soda pop. And I'm sorry if it does bother some people, but the message is still important to us. I don't care how it reaches us. I care that it reaches us. I think it's important that we receive these messages however we can. It's important that we learn to wrest these messages from the broken world that still sustains us. Ideals are important, but so is pragmatism. Terry Tempest Williams wrote a whole book about this. She wrote a book and she called it Finding Beauty in a Broken World. It's a good book. It teaches wisely, and in her book she writes, "Shards of glass can cut and wound, or they can magnify a vision. Mosaic celebrates brokenness and the beauty of being brought together." Mosaics celebrate brokenness and the beauty of being brought together, and yet simple togetherness is not enough for us these days. We are being so severely broken from one another and so severely broken from ourselves. It's time to heal. It's hard for us to imagine that our present and broken world is as furnished with love as it was when we sang of apple trees and honeybees, but it is. Our world today is precisely as furnished with love as it was back in the day, and the back in the day world was as precisely as broken as our world is today. It's complicated and it's contradictory and it's deeply paradoxical, but it is not hypocrisy. It is not hypocritical to say this or to sing this for ourselves. I'd like to build the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honeybees and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to see the world for once all standing hand in hand and hear the echo through the hills for peace throughout the land. The war in Vietnam was happening when we first learned to sing this song. And Watergate was happening. We were keeping deepest secrets from ourselves and one another. And against the violence, against the lies, and against the bitterness and the betrayals, we were wresting beauty from a broken world. Against the odds and against the grain, we wrested beauty, even as the earth was shaking beneath our feet. Rest is an interesting word to talk about on the morning of talking about Sabbath. Rest, W-R-E-S-T. This word spelled in this way is a verb, not a noun. It means to forcibly pull something from someone else's grasp, to take power or take control from someone after considerable effort and difficulty. It's from the Old English. It has a Germanic root, which means to twist or to tighten. The word rest, W-R-E-S-T, has nothing to do with the sacred meaning of Sabbath. It just sounds like it does. On the other hand, the word rest, R-E-S-T, is also an interesting word this morning. This word, spelled in this way, is a noun and not a verb. It means to cease work or movement in order to relax and refresh oneself and to recover one's strength. It's also from the Old English. It also has a Germanic root, but this root means league or mile. It is the distance after which one is expected to relax and to refresh oneself in order to recover. The word rest has everything to do with the sacred meaning of Sabbath. Greet this new year well rested. Know the deep meaning of Sabbath and gather up the spirit and imagine what it means to grow into the idea of peace, into the gift of grace, into the power of courage that is strong enough to sustain us, into love which is soft enough for us to rest. The Sabbath is a time of spiritual recovery and leads to unimagined possibilities. If you're walking down the hollow road or if you're standing on sacred ground. I would like to close this morning with the poem by a man named Robert Walsh. It's called Fault Lines. He writes, "Did you ever think that there might be a fault line passing underneath your living room, a place in which your life is lived in meeting and separation, wondering and telling, aware that just beneath you is an unseen seam of great plates that strain through time, and that your life is already spilling over the brim, could be further invaded and set off into a new direction, turned aside by forces that you were warned about but not prepared for. Shells could be spilled out, the level 4 could be set in an angle, in some seconds shaking. You would have to take your losses. You would have to do what must be done next. When the great plates slip and the earth shivers and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidity, to weighty slabs of concrete poured, or strength of cantilevered beam to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch to hold you in the web of life that is often torn but is always healing. There is your strength. The shifting plates, the restive earth, your room, your precious life, they all proceed from love, the ground on which we walk together. Rest in the love that holds us. Rest in the love that holds us all. Rest in the love that holds all. We rest in this love. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. May our learning curb the error which unthinking faith can breed, lest we justify some terror with an antiquated creed. That's a blues tune for theologians. Rest well in this moment. Rest up strong enough to accept the gifts that fall before us. When they come in beautiful packages, when they look like flowers, when they look like interruptions in our lives. May we find the rest, and may we rest within the conflict itself, so that we might come forward with our best beauty, wisdom, and peace. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.